Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The sun was slowly setting over the small town of Charleston, South Carolina. On the main road, a black SUV moved calmly along, not speeding. Inside, a man in an impeccably pressed uniform listened to a jazz station. His dignified and calm face reflected the serenity of a man accustomed to discipline and honor. This man was General Marcus D. Walker, Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces, a decorated hero for his years of service and humanitarian missions around the world. But at that precise moment, he was not a general. To some, he was just a black man driving a luxury vehicle. A police car was parked on the corner. Lieutenant Brad Collins, a white officer with an impulsive and proud temperament, was watching the traffic. When the SUV passed, he frowned. A guy like that in a car like that? Probably stolen, he murmured, grabbing his walkie-talkie. A few seconds later, the flashing lights came on. General Walker looked in the rearview mirror, sighed, then calmly pulled over to the side of the road. He knew the procedure too well, even. Collins got out of his vehicle, his hand on his weapon. Hands on the wheel. Not a move, he shouted as he approached, his aggressive tone contrasting with the calm of the situation. Walker obeyed without a word. "May I ask why you are arresting me, officer?" he asked in a calm voice. "Shut up. I'm the one asking the questions. Show me your papers." The general, without moving abruptly, handed over his military papers and permit. But Collins didn't even look at them. "Forged documents. You think I'm going to swallow that? A general, you? Come on, get out of the vehicle." Walker tried to explain, but the policeman, blinded by his arrogance, violently slammed him against the door, handcuffing him under the shocked gaze of passers-by. Phone cameras rose up, recording every second. "You're making a terrible mistake, officer," Marcus said calmly. "The only mistake here was believing you could fool a real cop," replied Collins, proud of his authority. But a few minutes later, while he was calling to transfer a suspect, a chilling voice rang out on the radio. "This is Central Command. Lieutenant Collins, release General Marcus Walker immediately. You have just arrested the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Army." There was complete silence. Collins' eyes widened. Around him, passers-by were still filming him, murmuring in disbelief. The general, standing handcuffed, simply looked at him, not with anger, but with a dignity that pierced him like a blade. On that day, the whole country would discover the public humiliation of a hero, arrested not for a crime, but for the color of his skin. The next morning, the streets of Charleston buzzed with unusual activity. Local newspapers, national news channels, and even social media were all talking about one thing. A white police officer arrests and humiliates the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army. The images filmed by passers-by had spread like wildfire. They showed General Marcus D. Walker, his wrists cuffed, his uniform crumpled by the brutality of the arrest, and Lieutenant Brad Collins, looking triumphant, completely unaware of the gravity of what he was doing. The atmosphere in the Central Police Station meeting room was icy. All the officers avoided meeting the gaze of Captain Robert Hayes, Collins' direct superior. The captain, a man in his 50s with a deep voice, stared at his lieutenant with an expression that was a mixture of anger and disgust. "Collins, explain to me what came over you." "Sir, I saw a suspicious vehicle, driven by a man who did not fit the typical profile of a high-ranking military officer. I acted according to procedure." "The procedure?" exclaimed Hayes, slamming his fist on the table. "The procedure does not authorize you to tackle a decorated general to the ground without a valid reason." Collins tried to defend himself, but the captain cut him off abruptly. "You have covered yourself in shame. And you have covered this entire unit in ridicule." Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, General Marcus Walker stood before a group of journalists. Always calm, upright, his uniform perfectly pressed, he addressed the cameras. "I'm not here for my reputation," he said in a firm voice. "I am here to talk about a much deeper problem. What I experienced yesterday was not an isolated incident. It is a reflection of a system where a black man in uniform is still perceived as a threat before being seen as a citizen. A murmur rippled through the room. The journalists frantically jotted down notes. Marcus continued. I have served this country for 35 years. I risked my life for it, I lost men under my command to defend liberty. But yesterday, in my own nation, I was treated like a criminal. Not because of my actions, but because of my color. His speech was broadcast repeatedly on all news channels. The reactions were immediate. Thousands of citizens took to the streets, carrying signs with the words, "Respect for General Walker. Justice for our heroes. Being black is not a crime." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Collins' life was falling apart. Suspended from his duties and harassed by the press, he had become the most hated man in the country. His house was surrounded by journalists. His wife had left town with their children, unable to bear the shame. Sitting alone in his living room, Collins watched the general's press conference on television. Marcus, ever calm, didn't ask for revenge. Only justice and reform. That dignity, that control. That was what destroyed him the most. Captain Hayes had told him a few hours earlier. You will never understand the greatness of a man like him, Collins. You wanted to humiliate a symbol. You ended up humiliating an entire institution. And while the country was demanding accountability, General Walker received a direct call from the President of the United States, who offered him the position of head of a national commission against racial abuses in law enforcement. The general's revenge would not come through anger, but through reform, truth, and the slow fall of those who had humiliated him. 2 days later, the city of Charleston was no longer the same. The signs, the debates, the cameras, everything revolved around a single name. Brad Collins, the police officer who had humiliated General Marcus Walker. His face was plastered all over the screens, between furious editorials and expert interviews. Some were calling for his immediate resignation, others were talking about an exemplary trial. The whole country was wondering. How could a police officer ignore the face of the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Army? The atmosphere at the police station was heavy. Collins' colleagues avoided his gaze, ashamed to have known him. Captain Hayes, after a meeting with federal authorities, entered the lieutenant's office. He coldly placed a file on the table. Brad Collins, you are officially suspended without pay. A federal investigation has been opened for excessive use of force, unlawful detention, and racial discrimination. Collins raised his head, livid. Are you kidding? It was a misunderstanding. I was just doing my job. Your job? Hayes repeated through gritted teeth. Your job is not to humiliate a general because he is black. What you did was betray your oath to protect the law, not your ego. Collins stood up abruptly, but Hayes added in a firm voice. You should prepare yourself, Brad. Because you're not just going to lose your badge. You're going to answer for your actions before a military tribunal. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., General Walker was meeting with the President of the United States in the Oval Office. The scene was solemn. Walker, still marked by the public humiliation, held his head high. The President, a man of experience, placed a respectful hand on his shoulder. General Walker, this country owes you an apology. What happened is unacceptable. I want you to lead the new Federal Commission on Police Reform. You have the nation's confidence. Walker paused briefly before replying. Mr. President, I am not seeking revenge. But I can no longer remain silent. This country will only change if the law truly protects each of its citizens, regardless of their color or uniform. Cameras from around the world captured the moment Walker walked out of the White House, surrounded by soldiers and journalists. His calm demeanor, dignity, and measured words made him a national icon. In the days that followed, Collins' downfall was rapid and brutal. The police commanders, fearing for their reputation, distanced themselves from him. The police union sponsors severed their ties. And when the federal investigation revealed his past disciplinary reports, complaints of abuse and racist behavior that had been covered up in the past, public opinion demanded his head. A chilling scene unfolded in front of the Charleston courthouse. Collins, handcuffed, was getting out of a police car under the flashes of journalists. The same channels that, a few days earlier, had broadcast his arrogance, were now showing his downfall. Citizens were shouting, "Justice poor Walker. No place for racism in the uniform." In the courtroom, General Walker silently attended the hearing. When the judge asked if he wished to testify, he stood up slowly, his decorated uniform glittering under the spotlights. "I am not here to humiliate a man, but to ensure that justice is served. It is not my dignity that needs saving today, it is that of our nation." The judge, visibly moved, nodded his head. Collins, with his eyes downcast, finally understood that a man's greatness is not measured by the uniform he wears, but by the way he treats others. Upon leaving the courthouse, Walker refused all interviews. He greeted a group of young soldiers who had come to support him, simply saying to them, "Never let hatred steal your honor." That day, the general won much more than a trial. He earned the eternal respect of a people, and brought to its knees the system that had tried to humiliate him. 3 weeks after Lieutenant Collins' trial, the United States was experiencing a historic moment. General Marcus D. Walker had been officially appointed director of the National Commission for Justice and Police Reform. The crowds cheered his courage, but behind his calm demeanor lay a fierce determination. He did not want to be seen as a victim. He wanted to be the catalyst for lasting change. One winter morning, under the majestic dome of the Capitol, the general addressed the American Congress. Millions of Americans were watching his speech live. Standing tall, impeccably dressed in his uniform, with a piercing gaze, he spoke in a calm but powerful voice. "I'm not here to talk about myself. I am here to talk about what it means to wear a uniform in a country that calls itself free. When a black soldier returns from a battlefield and is treated like a suspect in his own street. When a young man is arrested not for what he did but for who he is. So our freedom is an illusion." A solemn silence filled the room. The members of Congress, usually divided, stood motionless. Walker continued, his voice vibrating with contained emotion. "We cannot talk about security without talking about dignity. We cannot speak of justice as long as some faces inspire fear, and others, confidence, solely because of their color." At the end of his speech, the room rose in a standing ovation. Even those who, just the day before, doubted him, understood that they had before them a statesman, a symbol, a modern hero. In the following weeks, the Walker Commission launched several major reforms. Cameras are mandatory on every uniform of police. National training on racial bias for all security forces. Citizen oversight procedures in each police department. Stricter sanctions for agents perpetrators of discrimination. But Walker went even further. He created an academy of public ethics, where every future officer had to take a mandatory course on the human value behind the uniform. "You can carry a weapon," he told his students, "but as long as you don't know how to respect a face, you are not worthy of carrying it." One morning, the general received an unexpected letter. She came from a detention center in South Carolina. The name on the envelope, Brad Collins. In this letter, written in a trembling hand, the former lieutenant requested a meeting. Against all odds, Walker accepted. When Collins entered the visiting room, he seemed broken. No more arrogance, no more anger. He looked up, unable to meet the general's gaze. "I don't deserve for you to speak to me, sir. But I had to tell you. I was wrong. That day, I saw your skin, not your soul. And it destroyed me." The general remained silent for a moment, then replied softly. "What destroys a man, Collins, is not the wrong he commits, but the inability to recognize it. You have just taken the first step." Collins, in tears, murmured, "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just want to learn to be a better man." Walker placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "So start by teaching your children what you learned from me, that a man's color never defines his worth." Years passed. The name of Marcus D. Walker remained etched in history as the man who transformed a humiliation into a moral revolution. His face graced school textbooks, his speeches were studied in universities, and his academy trained a new generation of officers who were more humane, more just, more conscious. During his official retirement ceremony, on the large esplanade of the Pentagon, a huge crowd cheered him. The president presented him with the Medal of Freedom, saying, "General Walker did not only serve his country on the battlefield. He saved him from himself." Walker looked up at the flag fluttering in the wind and murmured to himself, "I didn't want war. I wanted peace. And this time, I won it." 10 years had passed since the day when the General Marcus D. Walker had left active service. His name now resonated like a legend, not only in the army, but throughout the country. His reforms had transformed the face of American justice, and his image, a symbol of integrity and courage, adorned the walls of military schools. But that morning, in a small academy in Texas, a special ceremony was taking place. Beneath a large star-spangled flag, hundreds of young recruits in uniform stood at attention. Among them, a young black man with a bright and proud gaze, Ethan Collins. Yes, Brad Collins' son. The Academy Commandant invited Ethan to come on stage to receive the Civic Merit Medal, an award given annually to the most exemplary student. Ethan, visibly moved, took the microphone. His voice trembled slightly, but his words carried powerfully. "My father was a policeman. He made a serious mistake a long time ago. A mistake that many have never forgiven. But a man reached out to him instead of destroying him. That man was General Marcus D. Walker." A murmur rippled through the room. Ethan looked up, searching for the general's photo hanging behind the podium, his grave and serene face under the gilded frame. This general could have chosen revenge. He chose justice. He could have fostered hatred. He chose instead to teach forgiveness. And that's why I'm here today. Because this man didn't just change my father. He taught me that honor is not about never falling, it's about getting back up without hatred. A respectful silence fell. Then, slowly, the entire assembly rose to applaud. Tears were streaming down the face of old Captain Hayes, who was among the guests. He murmured, "Walker, you really won this battle." Later, Ethan went alone to Arlington National Cemetery. Standing before the simple tomb of General Walker, he placed his medal on the stone. The wind made the surrounding flags rustle. He knelt down and said in a low voice, "General, I have never known you in person. But I carry your values in every gesture, every word, every decision. You have forgiven my father. And thanks to that, you saved his soul, and gave meaning to my life." He got up, bowed to the grave, then left the cemetery, his heart full of peace. Years later, people would still be talking about the Walker Code, a set of principles taught to all officers. Serve without distinction. Protect without prejudice. Judge by actions, never by color. On the pediment of the National Academy, a phrase was engraved that has become immortal. The true power of a uniform does not lie in the force it imposes, but in the justice he inspires. General Marcus D. Walker. And each new generation of officers, upon taking their oath, repeated aloud the words he had spoken on the day of his redemption. Never let hatred steal your honor. Thus, even after his death, General Marcus Walker continued to guide his country. Not with his sword, but with his wisdom. And for all those who knew his story, one certainty remained. Heroes never die, they become principles.